right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And here he is, a little bit Midwest, close to the East Coast. Jacob Prash. How you doing, Jacob?
Blessings in Jesus. How are you doing, more importantly? You doing well?
I'm all right. In Jesus' name, thank you, brother. Yeah, okay on the West Coast, despite his problems.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of problems indeed.
In the world. Not too far from me, down to 210. At least for me, down to 210. Jay, how you doing?
Doing well, Marco. Hello, Jacob. Hello, Davey.
Hello.
Good to see everybody watching.
All right, praise the Lord. And down under, it's Saturday morning. Oddly as it seems, it is Saturday morning for Davey. How you doing, Davey?
Pretty good, thanks. Good to be here with you.
All right, praise God. Well, it's so good to have you guys on. And of course, everyone who's watching, welcome in the name of the Lord. And thank you for joining us. It is another episode of Catching Up. And Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, 150 now?
150 episodes as of this episode.
We keep tallying it up. Who would have thought, Jacob, a long time ago that this was going to continue this long? But so it is.
Well, the pre-trib people said it would never.
And so we're still here. Now, Jacob, you got some things coming up down the road, not too far from you.
Yes, 14th, 7 p.m. at Church of the Open Door, 7th Street and 3rd Avenue. Saturday, the 14th, I shall be at Church of the Open Door with Pastor Dave Rossetto, Memorial Affiliated Church, and on the 15th from 3 in the afternoon to 5 in the afternoon in Baltimore. The next day, we shall be at the Church of the Open Door in Baltimore. Looking forward to seeing you there. Then I'm back to the UK not long after that. I'm sorry, but the English-Welsh conference is completely filled up. We can't get anyone else in anymore. It booked up faster than we thought. We requested more rooms. We got them, but then those filled up. So we're out of luck. I'm due to be in the Republic of Ireland in Boyle in County Roscommon on Monday the 6th. Details will soon be posted on the Morio website. I'm also in Belfast and Newton Abbey on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 5th of November in Northern Ireland and Belfast at Orangefield Crescent, Agape Christian Fellowship, and at Calvary Pentecostal Church in Newton Abbey. We'll be teaching by the pastor's request or the request of the eldership of the church from the book of Daniel at Agape Fellowship on Orangefield Crescent with Pastor Marty Foster. We'll be with Pastor Stephen Trimble in Newton Abbey. Look forward to seeing you there. After that, we're off to India, but that's another situation.
That's another story for another time. Great job, Jacob. And of course, you're going to be traveling for the next, few months. So
Yes.
save up your energy as you've been doing. So praise God for that. And David Lister, Davey, and I will be in Australia and New Zealand, 1st of November through the 19th. Davey, I get the dates wrong, but do you have more information on that, Davey?
Yes. Marco and David will be in Sydney on Saturday and Sunday, November 4th and 5th. We'll be in Brisbane on Monday, November 6th. We'll be in Perth Wednesday, November 8th. Melbourne the following weekend. I don't have the dates with me, and then we'll be heading off to New Zealand on the Tuesday. Yeah. We all have everything finalized, and I'll be able to let you know venues and everything by this time next week.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on, and it's going to be a very, very fascinating and amazing trip. We're looking forward to meeting the believers there in Australia and New Zealand. And of course, if there's any questions, Davey, what's the email address that they can?
Just email at ccodaussnz@gmail.com.
Yes, CCOD, that's a Community Church of Devore, where I pastor, and we're looking forward to meeting all the believers. And we'll be traveling with some of them, so it'll be a lot of fun and a lot of joy, and we look forward to seeing you guys there as well. So much to do, so little time. We got to get the word out. We got to get the gospel out. We got to get people to know Jesus and to be built up for what is to come. I think do we have the podcast scheduled, Jay, or if we just mention the podcast, that'd probably be sufficient.
Just wanted to mention, we do have the schedule. There's one that will be posted shortly As you know, we can be found on Apple, can be found on Podchasers, Amazon, and of course Spotify. So make sure you download the latest episodes that are coming up this week.
Yeah, it's coming. And podcast is a fascinating way to get the word out, fascinating way to get God's people to know God's word and to know it and to preach it and to share it. Got lots of messages from Jacob, yours truly, other ones as well. Kent's Corner, catching up, Sandy Simpson, more to come. And so keep praying for us as we add more and more content to our podcast schedule and as well as our YouTube. And we thank all of you who are watching on YouTube and Facebook. Although we want you to go to the other ones, we want you to go to Moriel.tv, we want you to go MorielTV.org, and Rumble have been really very kind to Moriel. So we asked that you guys could watch that as well. And they've been supporting a lot of people that have been speaking out against the evils of the world. So we applaud them. We applaud them for standing up for what many wouldn't consider to doing that today, which is, allowing people a platform to speak the gospel. So we applaud them for that. And so we're there, and we'll be taking questions on Rumble for the backstage. And we got some very juicy backstage. Not only are we talking about persecution and what's going on in the world, but it's persecution in a unique place, the United States. And of course, we're going to be talking also about churches who are not interested in persecution. Actually, they would add to the persecution and they would increase the persecution against believers. So don't miss that. And we'll be talking about that. I'd love to hear what Jacob has to say, unfiltered and unchained. Unfiltered and unchained on backstage. So if you really want to see Jacob get his hair down, yeah, come join us backstage. It won't be on YouTube and on Facebook Live. We'll be on the other platforms as well. Telegram, Vimeo, Rumble, Moriel TV, MorielTV.org, RTN. Did I miss one? I think I got them all. So we won't be on backstage on YouTube and Facebook. Now, you could also ask questions for Jacob. We're taking them live, and that would be on backstage. So go to Rumble and ask those questions while we're there. I think we got through a lot of the questions last week. We had a ton of questions, and we want you to do it. Plus, I'm going to ask you guys something, and I didn't tell Jay and Davey this, but here's a curveball, guys. If you guys have a comment and you want Jay or Davey to look at the comment and mention it online, please put that comment there. And if they see it and it's worth discussing it. I know Jay's brought up some comments before, so put it up there and let us know whether you agree or disagree, whether you complained or not, which there's a lot of complainers, but we want you to know that we'll take the comment, we'll address it. And so there you have it. We'll address it. And obviously we can't take every comment, but we'll leave it up to the discretion of Jay and Davey to let us know what the comments are. But there have been some great comments. I think we had somebody from Sweden the other day. It was fantastic. It was actually teaching us a thing or two about what's going on in Sweden. So we reached quite a bit of places, and there are people that live in those places that we're talking about that can give us a more 360 view of what's going on. And sometimes we can see in part, we can only see what we're able to see. But there are believers in different places of the world that we reach that give us an important view of what's going on the ground floor. So we do thank you for that. So Jacob, we won't be able to talk about Jamal Bowman, which is the congressman who pulled the fire alarm, if you believe it or not, here in the States at the congressional office in order to shut down the Congress during the last-ditch vote for voting for the budget. We won't be able to talk about Trudeau and his mess in Canada, and many Canadians, as we saw an exchange with one of them, want him out ASAP because it is imploding, but it's being propped up by the WUF. But we can't talk about him today. We'll have to talk about it another time. And we won't be able to talk about Newsom. Gavin Newsom, soon to be maybe running for the Democratic ticket, appointing the first Black lesbian to the U.S. Senate in California. Not only she is Black, she is a lesbian, she is a senator now, but she's also very racist. So this is Newsom's second United States Senate appointment. So the two senators from the U.S. have been appointed. From California have been appointed, to tell you how that works here in California. This is just a microcosm of how it works. So we won't be able to talk about that. But Jacob, you can comment on any one of those that you want before we get started on catching up. Any of those catch your attention?
Well, first of all, it shows both the hypocrisy and the ideological bankruptcy of the Democratic Party and of the Democratic Party in California specifically. To either appoint or not appoint somebody on the basis of race, gender, etc., goes against the principles of what the left has always claimed to represent. We're against discrimination. If you said, I'm going to appoint a white male, that would be considered an outrage. But if you say, I'm going to appoint a black female, morally, it should be given co-equal treatment. It's just you're appointing somebody on the basis of gender and race. Both are co-equally wrong. But then he gets not just a person appointed on the basis of gender and race, but he gets a lesbian. And then deliberately. And then he gets one from another state, Maryland. That person is not even a Californian. It's an absolute outrage, and it shows certainly the ethical bankruptcy of Newsom personally, but it testifies to the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party. What do you expect? This is how sick and depraved it's become. But what's really sick and depraved, what's really disgusting and absolutely unabashedly sick, twisted, are the people who don't think it's wrong.
Very true. And if you don't think that's what she said about white people would be infuriating.
She's a racist. She's a racist.
And what she said,
she's a demonstrable racist who should be banned from public life as a racist.
She ought to be, because if somebody said that on the other side, if somebody got up there as a white person and said the things that said about black people that she said about white people, it would be an outrage, like Jacob said. But she's also said things about people of faith, people like Catholics, people said against believers. So this is not someone that's just innocently got into that stage. I think there's some nefarious things going on there, as it usually is in California. But be that as it may, let's catch up, Jacob. It seems to be, and these are my own words, and I'm not trying to be sensational, the U.S. government and its policies and its politicians are imploding as we speak. And this is, of course, speaking of just the U.S., but I guess you can say the same thing about Ireland, about Scotland, about the U.K., about Germany. I hear that from other believers who say, you think we had it bad here in the States? Why don't you hear this one from, things like Sweden and things like that? But the Speaker of the House, for the first time in history, the Speaker of the House, the United States government, has been ousted. Now, the last time it was tried, it was 1910. I don't think any of us were around at the time. 1910, which failed. But in 2023, it did not fail. Kevin McCarthy from California is out. He was ousted by Republicans who did not want to vote for him, including Biggs, Buckhead, Getz, Good, and Crane. Final vote was 216-10. Which basically means they could vote him out as a Speaker of the House. The main issue was, of course, the budget, the $33 trillion budget, the deficit, $2 trillion, the side deals with Ukraine, the pandering to the Democratic Party, basically the switching, the bait and switch that McCarthy did after he promised to work with the Republicans, refuse the lunacy of the left. He didn't do it. Jacob, your thoughts on this McCarthy guy?
I think the real issue, obviously, there's the budgetary concerns and so forth, but that was not the real issue. The real issue is he broke his word. He's a rhino. I will not miss him. And I'm disappointed that people who I generally agree with, like Mark Levin, have taken such a hard line against him. He should never have been the Speaker of the House to begin with. We'd be much better off with somebody like Jordan, obviously, a conservative. McCarthy may have been a moderate rhino, but a rhino is a rhino, and that's what he is. I'm not at all sorry to see the end of him. He never should have been Speaker to begin with. We've had so many bad speakers like Boehner, who were Republican. Just horrible. We don't need another one, and that's what we got stuck with. Yeah. I hope Scalise, who's also a rhino, does not become the next Speaker. All you'll be doing is exchanging one rhino for another.
Yeah. A temporary deal was made to fund the government while not approving the other budgets, other expenditure like Ukraine. And they have a month and a half to figure this out. So the next vote's going to be the 17th. Now, rhinos are turning against conservatives, as you mentioned, on the media, from Mark Levin to Newt Gingrich. Now, Trump he's considering it. He's been nominated. McCarthy's not going to seek the position again to revote. So you're left with Jim Jordan, you're left with Scalise, you're left with possibly Trump, which would be incredibly, well, to me would be bad, but to me it would be interesting to watch. The most pressing issue is not Ukraine, not the border, not anything. According to Democrats, the issue is the fact that Jordan is going to could be the Speaker of the House. They're outraged at Jim Jordan being the Speaker of the House.
If they are outraged at the prospect of Jim Jordan being Speaker of the House, that is a very, very solid argument why he should be.
Yeah, I was going to say that's it. Now, they're willing to shut down the government. The left is willing to shut down the government in order to keep Ukraine funding. Now, this was a big issue, according to Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida, that McCarthy was willing to give $44 billion that the White House had asked, more aid to Ukraine. So Biden is not confident he'll get it with Jim Jordan as being the Speaker of the House if he becomes one. And he's going to go on national television to address the nation, not about the border, not about fentanyl, not about the violence, not about the budget crisis, but about needing more money for Ukraine. Jacob, like it or not, this is a big issue.
Why should that money come out of the pocket of the American taxpayer who's already facing a $33 trillion national deficit? Not one penny of that money should come out of the pocket of the American taxpayer. Biden took Obama betrayed the national interests of America and its allies and gave $150 billion, $150 billion in frozen assets to Iran. Which, like it or not, went to fund a regime that was perpetrating radical Islamic terror against Americans, killing Americans, and human rights violations. If that's not treason, I don't know, at least in principle, what isn't. I can't speak legally, but I certainly think in principle it is tantamount to treason. That $150 billion that Obama gave in frozen assets to Iran should have been used to fund the Pentagon to counter Iran. Well, so the $150 billion of frozen Russian assets should be impounded and used to fund. You want to fund the Ukraine? Make Putin fund it. Make Putin pay for it. Don't take money out of the American taxpayer's pocket. But let's remember something. Despite my disappointments in Donald Trump over Mar-a-Lago and certain other things he did with the gay gala and so forth, that prevents me, unfortunately, from being able to vote for him again. Irrespective of that, had he been president, Putin would not have invaded the Ukraine. Afghanistan would not have fallen the way it did. Biden or Joe Biden gave Putin the green light to do it. Had Trump been in the Oval Office, this would not have happened to begin with. But the media is not telling us that. They just want us to write another check.
Oh, keep sending the checks. 44 billion. And Jacob, you said 150 billion with the B for Iran. That was the Obama.
Obama funded a radical Islamic regime that was engaged in killing American citizens and threatening nations and interests favorable to the United States and the Middle East, including Israel. That's what Obama did. And he did it with the complicity of Hillary Clinton, certainly, and of the so-called Green Czar we have now, John Kerry, and obviously Biden. Those people were complicit in what amounts to an active betrayal of the United States.
Yeah, now we're up to 113 for this war that seems to have no end. Now we have a comment. Jay, did you have a comment? I don't know if
when we were talking about Jim Jordan, one of our Watcher 21 mentioned that Trump has just endorsed Jim Jordan for Speaker of the House.
Very interesting.
Donald Trump endorsed him this morning or last night.
Thank you for that comment. I do have to remember. I think didn't Trump endorse McCarthy too, Jay?
He did.
Yes, he did. I think he did.
Oh man, I'm not saying Jim Jordan is a bad choice. I'm not saying that. I think it is a good choice as an American, but Trump hasn't had the best endorsements lately. So maybe he's finally got a good one.
People turned on him, like John Barr and like John Bolton and like Miley. They were all appointed by Trump.
Yeah,
he could be a very bad judge of character.
You can't be.
He supported Oz as the carpetbagger to be nominated for the Senate seat in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump can make very politically bad choices. He can be very unwise.
Yeah.
Marco, if I may, we have another comment that just is on the topic of the Speaker of the House. Pookie Martinez asks, even though he may not get the vote support as needed, but would Thomas Massey be a genuine candidate for House Speaker?
Massey's an interesting guy.
He'd be dark horse.
Yeah. Interesting guy. May not have the support. He's right. He may not have the vote, but
another one who I like is Byron Donaldson. I like Byron, the black guy. I like Byron Donaldson a lot.
Somebody put him up there. Seriously, somebody put him up there. No, I agree with you, Jacob. I certainly do. Jacob, it's been said by historians, including Victor Davis Hanson, that we're not only in the middle of a revolution, but we're in the most explosive time in U.S. history, probably ever. And the next 12 months are going to get even more explosive. Now, obviously, he might have said this out of hyperbole. I don't know the context, but it's interesting that we're now in the age of not order, but disorder here in the States. And many people have claimed that the U.S., as it's grown spiritually weaker and it's spiritually darker, that socially, morally, and of course, politically, we would be in disarray. And these are historians. These are people that not necessarily believers, but they do agree with the Judeo-Christian faith that we are in the middle of not only a revolution, but the most explosive time in U.S. history. And they've compared it to Rome. I know you've talked about Rome and you've done some wonderful messages on the book of Romans and the book of Acts from it. But give us your take on maybe their perspective and how you see it, the U.S. failing in its morality and its spirituality.
Okay, first of all, there were academic historians of the biblical perspective, going back to Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee.
Yes.
And even Winston Churchill, A History of the English-Speaking Peoples.
Great book,
who understood the relationship between the Judeo-Christian ethos and the development of the British Empire and the United States and so forth. And the erosion of that is in proportion to the departure from biblical principles. There have been secular historians who have always said that. You can go back to the 1950s, and there were radio preachers before they were corrupted by the money preachers. There were conservative evangelical radio preachers warning that what happened in Rome, in Babylon and so forth, is incipiently taking place in Western society, including the United States. So this is not new. It has simply come to pass what people like Tozer and so forth were warning about more than a generation ago, and as well as secular historians. The two comments I would make concerning the opinion voiced by Victor David Hanson, who I like, is I would say it is the most serious since the American Civil War. I wouldn't necessarily say it in the history, but certainly since the Civil War.
Wow.
In terms of the division. Secondly, the second thing I would say is it is not just the United States that is in this social chaos because of the moral decline. It is the Western civilization. It is certainly not just the United States. You'll find the same climate. You're going to Australia, New Zealand, you're going to find the same climate there. You find it in Canada. You find it in Great Britain. You'll find it in all of the Protestant democracies, and including the English-speaking Protestant democracies. You're going to find the same thing. So I would not limit it to the United States. They're very America-centric. I think it is okay to be America-centric, but you also have to be globally centric. And I don't see it as peculiar to America by any means.
Yeah, and to be fair, he did mention that it was the Western society, but he was focusing on the U.S. But
in that case, I'm with him.
Yeah, and he obviously compared it to Rome, and he obviously compared it to the genuine questions were what's looking like here in the States over the next 12 months. And he said over the next 12 months, it's going to be explosive.
I'm with him.
Yeah. And Jacob, the context, of course, was regarding the explosiveness is the Trump court case. The Trump court case. But before we get into that real quick, Jay, you had a comment on it. I'm sorry.
No problem. I just wanted to mention that you've heard it a million times that America is going the way of Rome. But I submit to you that looking at it from maybe a different angle might give a little bit more clarity. The fall of the Han Dynasty, you had the emperor, the main legislative body that was interested in the welfare of the people. And then all around him were bureaucrats So like we have the swamp, like we have professional bureaucrats. They had the same thing in the eunuch class of people, the bureaucrats. And those were the most corrupt officials, debased morally, and would do anything to retain their power. And multiple times, the court had to purge them before basically the Han Dynasty fell into complete chaos and was replaced after a long civil war. And I'm seeing that because we have the exact same thing. We have a class that is around the power center that is in it for itself. I could name different three-letter words that are very, very close to the hallways of power that are all like the eunuch bureaucrat class of the Han Dynasty. Their power is based upon being around the government, supposedly protecting and helping it.
Yeah, I remember Comey going up there and doing a hearing, and he couldn't remember things. I think he said 48 times, I don't remember. Just trying to get away from ever answering a question, but continued in perpetuity what is going on with the intelligence agencies.
Yeah, Comey is a moral eunuch.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way you have to put it.
The parallelism that James raises with the Han Dynasty, the last dynasty, is exactly correct. This is going, of course, back before Chiang Kai-shek and so forth. He's exactly correct. But what I would additionally point out, affirming what James said, is Daniel chapter 6, during the reign of Darius the Mede. Then Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. Then the commissioners and satraps, the eunuchs of that era, that is, and some of them actually were eunuchs, we know from the book of Esther, the bureaucracy, the deep state, the equivalent of that era, began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs, but they could find no ground of accusation of evidence or corruption against him, inasmuch as he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. And these men said, "We'll not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." What happened in the book of Daniel is what is happening now. The real target
is
the Judeo-Christian faith.
Amen. Well, I think that you're on the money on that, Jacob, and we're going to be talking about that absolutely on Backstage, because that's where it's headed. That's where it's headed. Don't get me wrong. I think all these things are happening to conservatives, to people that don't support the left, are part and parcel of it. But the ultimate target, like Jacob said, it was Daniel. It was born again believers, Bible-believing Christians. So, Jacob, let's talk about this Trump case, because it's certainly gathering a lot of attention.
Which
the one in New York. Let's pick the one. Yeah, let's pick the one in New York. Your native New York. Let's put it that way. With Letitia James. I don't think she's inviting you for dinner anytime soon. But she's come out and said, "Oh, it's so unfair that they think I'm going against Trump. That's politically motivated." Have you seen the videos of what she says? She sounds like a Black Panther.
The woman is demonstrably a racist liar. She is a racist liar, and demonstrably. If a white person said the thing she said, they would have been disbarred. Why wasn't she? Why wasn't she? She actually said that she was going to pursue politically motivated prosecutions. She actually said that. And now she's denying her own words. The woman is a proven liar.
Yeah. She's anti-Christian. She's against babies being born because she says she's had plenty of abortions and she's very happy about it. And
she likes killing Black babies. She's murdered a few grown.
Yes, she does. She
says you're the racist because you don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Now, you don't agree with killing Black babies, you must be a racist. That's her ideology.
That is her ideology. Now, the idea here of Trump being there at this court case, it wasn't even a court case. It was basically the judge saying, well, we know that, and this is what he said in the past, we know that jurors get it wrong. And so I have tools to get around that. And he's already made a decision, even though the case hasn't finished, even though he made a decision that Trump's businesses can't function in New York. Trump's, I guess you could say the Mar-a-Lago resort is worth this much, while other Obviously, other homes nearby are worth more than that. But they're going after him, after his assets, after his businesses. This is unreal. I have never seen.
The judge
anything.
was sitting there laughing. That's not judicial misconduct and prejudicing
Yes.
a case. I don't know what is. Why isn't the judge removed? If not removed from the bench, certainly should be removed from the case if there was
Yes.
real justice. But in New York, there's no justice. Now let's go on and look further. None of the banks or lending institutions lost any money. They were all paid back with the appropriate interest. Nobody was defrauded of anything. Everyone got their money back. He met all the terms of the loans, all the terms of the agreements. There was no crime. There was no real crime. There was no victim. There was no nothing. Nobody filed a complaint. No bank had any comeback or saying that they were in any way defrauded. It is just a political hit job by a corrupt DA, Bragg, who lets murderers go and kill people. Bragg, that piece of sub garbage, who wanted to charge first-degree murder of an aged Hispanic immigrant with a green card who came into the country legally. When a robber burst into the bodega to the grocery shop, robbed it, and tried to kill the old man killed the robber in self-defense who was trying to kill him, and Bragg had that old man charged with murder before being pressured to drop the charges. This is the kind of vermin that Bragg represents. Soros funded. He's the same as Krasner in Philadelphia. He's the same as Willis in Georgia. He's the same as Kim Fox in Chicago. They are all the same. They are funded by white liberalism.
It is unbelievable. Oh, Mosby in Baltimore, that's
Mosby. Well, she's under indictment at least.
Yeah.
Corruption.
Jacob, have you ever seen anything like this? I mean,
Banana Republics.
Okay, Banana Republic. You got it right. So, and it is setting a precedent. This is my concern. It's setting a precedent for what's coming after this. That once you've done this, you can do this to pretty much anybody that's politically opposition.
And it's going to be done to Christians.
Yeah, I think Jay brought up a good point. Jay, what was your point on other millionaires and billionaires who are at risk now? Their assets being seized, sold, and basically cease and desist.
That's
going
exactly
after the white pillow guy.
That's exactly it. You open the door against Trump, you just wait. Everybody who has any money in the bank, has any assets, owns property, your property. If you have the wrong view, you have a wrong political view, you're against your rivals and they're in power, that's not yours. It'll be taken away. They will find dirt on you. If they have to, they will go into your high school yearbook and find out that you bullied someone, and that's the reason to take away all your money.
Did it with Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Exactly.
High school. Went back to high school.
Exactly.
Can you imagine this? This is exactly where we are. And Jacob, most people have said, well, not saying most, some people have said, we may not even have an election in 2024 because they're going to ramp up the rhetoric and be so explosive. And people are going to be absolutely enraged at what they're doing to Trump from the conservative side. That is going to cause the government to say, this is too dangerous. We can't have it. We need to pull back. But one guy who is completely heading into the election is RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr., and he's running as an independent. And your thoughts, Jacob, is that going to hurt Trump, hurt the Democratic Party by being an independent and pulling from, let's say, the middle ground?
There are a lot of people who supported Trump who have become disgruntled about him, as I have. But that does not mean that they are going to vote for a liberal Democrat. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a traditional liberal Democrat in the tradition of Sam Nunn, maybe of Scoop Jackson a bit, and certainly of his uncle JFK. Old-time Democrats, traditional Democrats, they don't like what's happened since Obama, arguably since Clinton, and they certainly don't like Biden. So they're looking for a traditional Democrat representing the Democratic Party they once knew. Some of those people may vote for Kennedy. He has a name brand. But of course, the same as the superdelegates, the Democratic Party or the not undemocratic Democratic Party with its 100 superdelegates will close ranks against him the way they did against Sanders or anybody else who threatens the establishment. That's what they will try to do. Hence, Kennedy is running as an independent, if he runs as an independent. The only question is, who will he hurt more? He'll obviously hurt Trump to a degree, but will he hurt Biden to a greater degree? That would mean that the Democrats would have to get a stronger candidate than Biden, if they can, to prevent votes being siphoned off by Kennedy. Watch out for people like Michelle Obama or Newsom.
Yeah, this is a good point. In fact, not too far from where Jay lives, Obama was there this past week at the Beverly Hills restaurant with Tom Hanks and what's his name, Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg.
They were enjoying some nice meals after being on their yacht, and of course, the question came up: you think Michelle Obama is going to run? Well, no comment. No comment from the former president. She might be a parachute for the DNC. I don't know if she's going to run, but she might be the parachute that they're looking for.
Right now, my mind would be on Newsom, but it's been said a week in politics is a long time.
Yeah.
In the age of social media, an hour in politics is a long time.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Jay.
If Obama was with Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, can almost guarantee you that money was exchanged as far as contributions to something. I don't know what it could be, but it's there's money that is being raised for something that Obama wants to do. So
Bingo.
why would you talk to the two richest men in Hollywood? Probably.
Bingo. It's just odd, isn't it? It's just odd that it just happens to be, some Spielberg's yachts. I think it's called the Portofino. Some restaurants, some rubbing of the hands, some greasing of the palms, and voila, there you have a new DNC. I guess candidate is going to come out with the support of the Hollywood elites. So much to say about that. Jacob, let's switch gears to something a little bit more broad in terms of the world, and something that it's very destructive. It's I'm sick to my stomach just talking about this. The NATO website posted an op-ed which calls for nuclear war preparation and strike against Russia. This is by Gregory Weaver, who is a retired American defense official, basically saying, should the U.S. and China clash over Taiwan, the author claims that a full-scale war in Europe would likely to follow. That if Russia is in Ukraine, then a nuclear war is going to follow. Now, this some very heavy rhetoric by NATO by posting something from an American defense official, ex-American defense official, and of course the West, instead of fearing nuclear war, Weaver says we should embrace it. Now, who talks like that? Now, at the General Assembly, the UN General Assembly last month, Sergei Lavrov warned the West, saying that the West have become so obsessed with the strategic defeat on Russia, they have lost their sense of self-preservation. This is what he said. And Medvedev, the former president, said the number of leading idiots in NATO countries is growing. So I'll leave you to make those comments on it. This is, of course, heavy rhetoric. Heavy rhetoric is one thing, but when you start talking nuclear, when you start planning things, when you start moving into that direction, Jacob, makes me really, really nervous. I'm not for war, but I know Jesus talked about war. I know he talked about rumors of war. I know war is described in the book of Revelation as one of the horsemen that comes in. But Jacob, I'm not saying talk us off the ledge, but what is happening with this amp talk about
First
war?
Of all, what they are saying about NATO is true. It is true. The problem is not what they are saying about NATO. The problem is what they're not saying about themselves. They have been toying with the nuclear option, or threatening or insinuating some kind of a nuclear response to what's happening in the Ukraine for about 1 year, about 15 months. It's bilateral. Both sides are doing it. So therefore, he's yelling at NATO for what the Russians have been doing themselves. You actually had some crackpot woman who must have done it with the approval of Putin and the Kremlin, talking about violating the nuclear test ban treaty and setting off a nuclear device in Siberia.
Yeah.
It's happening on both sides.
Yes,
now,
she's from
when
RT, by the way. She's from
What it
RT,
is,
RT News.
yes, yes, correct, RT News. What this is called is posturing. Posturing. Both sides are posturing. They're trying to scare people. They're trying to generate this kind of rhetoric and loose talk about not just nuclear proliferation, but the possibility of some kind of a nuclear exchange. They're posturing. But anybody who does it was called MAD, mutually assured destruction. You must be mad to do that.
Yeah.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Nikita Khrushchev came to New York, when I was a little boy, I've told this story before, or many people, of course, aware of it, remember it even, took off his shoe and began pounding on the podium in the General Assembly in New York, "We will bury you." When he got back to Russia, in a matter of months, the Politburo deposed him. We cannot have a nut with his finger on the button. If you read the book, The Final Days, about Nixon, how Kissinger and Haig were trying to control Nixon from exploiting the Yom Kippur War and things of that nature when he called the Stage 3 nuclear alert against the Soviets. His willingness to use nuclear confrontation in order to try to save his neck politically during Watergate. At that point, the Republican Party establishment and the right wing of the Republican Party, at that time led by Barry Goldwater in the Senate, turned against Nixon. Ford wanted him gone. The conservatives, not the rhinos, even the conservatives like Barry Goldwater wanted him gone. His own party turned against him and he resigned. The Soviets got rid of Khrushchev. The United States got rid of Nixon. You used to get rid of people like this because everybody knew it was mad. Such talk was madness. Well, that's not happening now.
Not anymore. Yeah, not anymore. Putin advisor says to nuke the UK off the map. These are advisors. This is Lavrov. This is RT News. This is NATO. It just seems, posturing or not, somebody's going to go crazy and actually do it. And this is my concern that, of course, we're talking about, here's another guy, Grant Shapps, defense minister of the UK, who says we need to train Ukrainian troops into Ukraine to fight the Russians. Who says things like that? Now, Rishi Sunak walked it back. He walked it back and says, no, we're not going to train them until after the war, which makes no sense at all whatsoever. However, the Russians just say, look, we're going to have to go after the UK, and whether posturing or not, they showed this map of the UK with the different cities and their targets. Now, first Poland, Jacob, then Slovenia, stopping shipments into Ukraine. Then the UK stops the idea of sending troops there. It's the writing on the wall that Ukraine is being abandoned by some of those Western allies, and they're leaving him out to dry. The men in the green suit.
Yes, that's what's happening. The
Churchill of our day. It just, plus we had some news that thousands of Ukraine soldiers are surrendering.
Thousands. The casualties among the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And the destruction of the national infrastructure of the Ukraine is being deliberately understated and underreported. They only emphasize what's now the consequences for Russia have been abysmal. They're very serious, but not nearly as cataclysmic as what is happening to the Ukrainians.
Yes.
With Russia, it is a disaster. With Ukraine, it is a cataclysm. That's the reality. The only way is negotiate.
Right.
Not talking nuclear exchange.
Yeah. So the Ukrainians, they're just losing kids left and right. They're losing young men left and right. And just to win a little small portion in the attack on Kherson, and Russia pulled back. I guess they wanted to save their troops more than anything else. Ukrainians lost heavily just to kind of push back Russia. So are they happy to trade human lives for some small territorial gains? Or it doesn't.
You can't get honest statistics.
Yeah.
But the Russians probably have 50,000 dead, which is a lot more than Afghanistan, and approaching Vietnam type losses, Korea type losses. It's going into that league now, but on a much more concentrated time period. And they may have had 150,000 casualties. The Ukrainians may have had 400,000 casualties, but you cannot get honest statistics from anybody.
No, no, it's a cloud of it's a cloud of war. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, we have a great comment from Jack Miranda 063. Have we considered that Russia has more oil than they know what to do with? They have all the energy they need, have their territorial claims to these oil fields fueled their aggression.
I don't think that that is a major issue in their aspirations towards expanding westward. I don't think that. I think they miscalculated in thinking that Europe was so dependent on their oil and natural gas, Europe wouldn't react the way it did. I think that Putin is one of his miscalculations, one of them. But I don't think that oil is a major factor in Russia's motives in trying to do what it did in going into the Ukraine. I personally don't think it is a major factor.
All right, very good. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. Jacob, the U.S. just had a nationwide alert. First nationwide test of the U.S. emergency alert system. Basically was nationwide, every carrier, every phone, I think TVs and laptops as well. Now, Russia held the day before nationwide nuclear attack exercise on October 3rd. So the alert here in the U.S. was October 4th. The nationwide nuclear attack exercise in Russia was October 3rd. Related, yes or no?
Yes, this again, it's bipartisan posturing.
The exercise in Russia, which was fascinating to me, which was been done region by region, it included preparation for the destruction of Russia up to 70%. So what would they do if they would attack? What would they do if 70% of Russia was completely destroyed, which is really, really interesting. It basically, martial law would be introduced, all the mobilization and all that stuff and retaliation. So it's, I remember, well, it wasn't so much when I was a kid. You could just kind of remember some of those times where they had us go under the desk, but certainly at the time when you were in school.
I remember. Nobody can win. Nobody can win. Wars and rumors of wars. Let's hope this is a rumor.
Yeah.
There is something else that scares me. I'm not saying it's it. I'm just saying I'm not sure it's not going to be it, or it can't be it. When the destruction of Babylon the Great comes in 1 hour, okay, sudden destruction, and it is an empire that all the other nations of the world got rich because of her. When you go back to Brenton Woods, which is now collapsed, and the fact that the United States is a gross importer, other countries are lending us money so we can buy their products, courtesy of Keynesianism. If the United States went down, the global economy would go down with it. I'm not saying that what happens in Revelation 17 and 18 is the United States or at all. I'm just saying I wish I could absolutely rule it out.
Gotcha. Now, Jacob, let's talk about another war, which it's not getting a lot of attention. You have brought up what's going on with Armenia and Azerbaijan. We talked about that at length, and thank you for bringing that up because not a lot of people are reporting it. But here's another one. Serbia massing troops and tanks at the Kosovo border. We're back to the NATO days with Clinton and Solana and Clark. NATO troops are in Kosovo because they're trying to stop the ethnic cleansing of Albanians against Serbs in Kosovo. So Albanians don't want Serbians in Kosovo, and it's a whole story going back to Yugoslavia and how it broken up, and we can get into that. But Kosovo is basically a place where Serbians are not welcome, and they're being ethnically cleansed by Albanians who are very close to NATO, and Serbia is very close to Russia. So it's developing that NATO is getting another war with Russia mixed in the Balkans again. We're back to the Balkan days.
That war with Bosnia-Herzegovina, the whole bit never ended. Again, you had, first of all, the betrayal by the Clinton administration, by Wesley Clark, and by Tony Blair in league with the socialist Javier Solana from the EU, backing essentially taking sides with the Kosovo Liberation Army, which were aligned with Al-Qaeda before September 11th. Which pleased Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and so forth. There were no good guys in that conflict. when the Yugoslav fragmented. They were no good guys. These Croats were no good. The Serbs were no good. And the Muslims were no good. None of them were any good. There was no righteous power fending off evil. They're just choice between three bad guys. But we should not have taken the side of any one bad guy. Milosevic did, in his mind, it was just defending Europe from Islamic aggression. Right. That's what he was doing. That's what he was doing. We should have kept out of it. We should not have got into the Balkans. The Balkans is what caused World War I. The result of World War I was World War II. The result of World War II was the Cold War. It is a powder keg. Keep away from it. But we didn't. And now it's back again, and it will always be back. Let's understand that is where the Roman Empire fragmented between the Greek Orthodox East and the Roman Catholic West. It is also where the Saracens and the Islamic world conflicted with the nominally Christian world of Europe. It is always the point of conflict between the Christianized world and the Islamic world, and the division between the Byzantine and Latin world when the Roman Empire fragmented. It's always been a powder keg. What does the United States or Britain have to do with getting involved in it? It is a death trap.
Now you have British troops, and you have the Biden administration that's consulting with its allies there to match the threat level. So I hate to say this, but this reaction of the White House seems very similar to what we saw with Ukraine at the beginning with Russia. So Serbia has historical ties to Russia. They're very close to them. Albania to NATO. So you got another thing again. And Jacob, the history is absolutely perfect right there, where you describe how these things have been there. They will always be there. And it is not to say don't ignore it. It's always going to be there. It is to say when these things are happening in concert with other wars, and we haven't even touched China and Taiwan. We didn't bring up Azerbaijan in Armenia in detail. We just brought it up in Iran, Israel. I mean, you have multiple hotspots.
Yes.
Then
rumors of wars in many places.
Yeah,
the Nagorno-Karabakh is another thing that has very ancient roots. Conflict between the Armenians and the Muslims.
Yeah,
the Armenians were pushed into the hands of the Russians. There's no love lost between the Russians and the Armenians, and the Armenians and the Russians.
Yeah,
but up against Islam, you can't choose your allies. Again, it is the bad diplomacy and corrupt politics of the West, of the EU, of NATO, and of the White House. We should not be aligning ourselves with Islam in any situation.
Jacob, real quick, on a spiritual level, this is important for young believers or even believers that are growing in the Lord. It's when we bring this up, we're not saying there's a war here, there's a war there, Jesus is coming tomorrow. We're not saying that. But we're also not saying, hey, there's always been there, so don't worry about these things. How should a young believer, how should maturing Christians see these conflicts and how
he said Jesus drew a distinction between the remote signs of his coming and the imminent signs of his coming. And he made it clear that these wars and rumors of wars would increase, as would seismic activity, famines, pestilence, and so forth. These things would increase. But he immediately said, but the end is not yet. We need to avoid rambunctious. I'd point people to a teaching that we did entitled The Caveats of the Olivet Discourse. And one of the things Jesus warned against is rambunctious. Just think again of birth pangs, which the scripture uses to demonstrate or illustrate what it's going to be like. When a young mother becomes pregnant, she gets plumper and plumper. Obviously, things begin to happen. Hormonal changes. The baby, the abdomen begins to protrude because there's a baby that's growing. Okay, it's happened. But when someone is 2 months pregnant, or 3 months pregnant, or 4 months pregnant, that doesn't mean the baby is going to be born, next week. Yeah, these things are happening, and it's becoming more visible, and it's moving that way, and you know what's going to happen. But it also tells you, well, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It takes 40 weeks gestation for the baby to come. It doesn't take, it doesn't happen after 15 weeks gestation.
No, you're absolutely right. And so, very good, very good. So we have to look at it in terms of what Jesus said. First of all, in terms of his immediate signs, and then those remote signs that they're there in the world. We look at them, but they increase in frequency and intensity. Right. And ultimately, the baby's going to come, and we'll know when these things are happening. I mean, look at the seals. When the seals were broken, and you have the red horse, and then there's war everywhere, and it takes large parts of humanity out because of wars. Then we're into that. But as you see in the horizon, these things are not to be ignored. These things are not to be concerned. We're definitely concerned about, especially, I can sit here in California and think like, well, this war is so far away. But I think of the believers in Ukraine. I think of the believers in these countries that are, believers in Armenia, believers in the Balkans. To them, it is really difficult. To them, it is really the war. So I'm not sitting here in my little, Eiffel Tower here and saying, well, this is, ivory tower, saying that this is, the wars over there. But to consider that these wars are atrocious, horrible, but they're part of the last day scenario. Jacob, one thing that is really horrific, and it's coming down probably faster than the war, is the implosion of economies in the world. We really have focused on China. We talked about Germany a couple weeks ago, but in a general way, let's talk about the euro and the dollar, the global shifting from these two currencies, the euro, which affects a lot of the European countries, and the dollar, which affects most of the world. The economy situation in the United States is bad, but the European Union has degraded so much in recent weeks. According to SWIFT, the collapse over the last 9 months, transactions dropped, meaning the transaction of euros, people wanting euros, from 38% in January, about 10 months ago, to 23% the end of last month. This is the lowest it's been in more than 12 years. It is acknowledged that Europe is already in a recession, and the U.S. is already just about there. You talked about Germany before. Describe the decline of the euro and what that means, and then the decline of the dollar and what that means.
Okay, there are three aspects of this. First of all, if Germany is in recession, Europe is in recession. End of story. Post-Brexit, now with Britain out of the equation, if Germany is into recession, Europe is in recession. Secondly, because of the Obama administration era, the CBI changed their accounting methods by which they would index inflation falsely, not including things that had been included before, in order to generate an artificial rate of inflation that's not the true one. You can't believe what the government says. You cannot believe the CBI. You cannot believe the Federal Reserve. Obviously, you cannot believe the White House. So the rate of inflation in America is substantially worse than it is, but also the state of the economy is substantially worse than it is. Had we had an honest system of accounting in the CBI, the United States would be considered in recession, most likely, or just certainly on the brink of it. So those are two things we need to take into account. The third thing we need to take into account is that there is an artificial buoyancy that are given to these economies in different ways. Right now, you have a certain amount of retrenchment of capital reinvestment in the United States simply because people are leaving certain sections of Asia, particularly China, and are leaving Europe. That gives a kind of a boost to the United States at the expense of Europe. Now, look, the EU it's good news. If the EU declines, that is good for the United States. It is good for the world. It is good for Europe if the EU declines. But when we look at it in terms of the book of Daniel, when the iron stops clinging to the clay, that is something that creates a crisis that accentuates the rise of Antichrist. That is what it's going to head towards if it keeps going the way it is with this decline of the EU. That is what it's going to happen. The iron will not adhere to the clay. You'll see a fragmentation in the EU and in Europe. You've already got it between old Europe and new Europe. When this continues, you're going to see, again, the Antichrist is going to be waiting in the wings. When, who he is, these things I don't want to speculate about. But I know what the book of Daniel says when the iron does not adhere to the clay. Now, the other factor is, because of the decline of China, and China's decline is not just in the real estate market, it is in local government debt, it is in corporate debt, and it is in shadow banking debt. Okay. China is in the state Japan was in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Japan reached about 17% of the global economy, and people began speaking of it, challenging the United States as the dominant economy. After that, it went down the tubes. China has now reached that point. China is where Japan was then. Yes, there are differences, but the differences, if anything, make China worse. Japan had an average income of about $45,000 per capita then. China is in worse shape than Japan was then in proportionate terms. Although China does control the banks and the corporations, there's a party control. It's not a free market. The government can simply enact policies more easily than can happen in Japan or in the United States or Europe. That is the other side of it. But be that as it may, broadly speaking, China is where Japan was, even though they are worse off in some ways and functionally better off in others. It's the same essential situation. So with the yuan being weak, and China cannot strengthen the yuan, it'll hurt its exports even further, and its exports are declining. And with the ruble, you've now got more than 100 rubles to the dollar. A ruble is worth less than a penny as of yesterday. It's worth less than 1 cent US as of yesterday. BRICS is not going to emerge as a major threat to the dollar anytime soon. What will emerge as a threat to the dollar? A central bank digital currency. That is what will happen. Remember, there's no money. We have no money. We only have digital currency.
Yes.
Now let's understand this. When Bretton Woods ended, when Nixon defaulted on the dollar, okay, or semi-defaulted on the dollar, the United States actually kept ownership of the gold. But when the dollar was no longer gold-backed, it was only the promise of corrupt governments and the vitality of a so-called economy that gave the currency's value. Okay, that's what happened. It's no coincidence that in the 70s, the petrodollar, not the euro dollar simply, but the petrodollar, oil to a degree, began to function the way gold and silver did under Bretton Woods. Now that is going. Even if the United States allowed for open drilling and built the Keystone Pipeline, that would help a bit. But there's no gold, there's no silver, there's no oil. Oil's not the same as it was. So what's left? The real threat to the dollar, the biggest threat, is central bank digital currency. Remember, there is no money. What we have is fiat currencies.
Yes.
All the legal tenders are themselves only fiat currencies. It's not just Bitcoin that's a fiat currency. Bitcoin is a fiat currency that admits it's a fiat currency. That's all. Fiat currency is simply a fiat currency that admits it's a fiat currency. The dollar and the euro and the British pound are lies.
Yeah, they don't admit it. Yeah,
They're just lies.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about what does this mean to the UK and the British pound? I mean, so the euro's going down. The US is not going down as fast, but going down nonetheless. There you have a country that's not Europe, in a sense, not continental, not Brexit, on its own. Will it hold up?
It will not hold up well, but the Europhiles will blame Brexit for it, which is absolutely absurd. The euro is declining on its own merits. Germany is in recession on its own merits. Those people trying to blame Brexit for what is happening in Britain are talking through, or they're lying. They either don't know what they're talking about, or they're lying. So the answer is Britain will not hold up well, unless something happens.
Yeah, one interesting thing, and those who are watching the UK have pointed this out, and I think you guys have sent emails and stuff like that in the past. Rishi Sunak is a very, very big on blockchain currency and digital currency. My concern, as well as here in the States, because we already have some kind of executive order in place by the president, Biden, is that they will go to the CBDCs, as you mentioned, a lot sooner than we think. A lot sooner than we think.
That is not impossible.
Yeah. So we reached the hour mark. I believe we're an hour mark into it. So we just want to remind everyone we're coming down to the last few topics of catching up. And we thank you for watching, those who are watching live and those who are watching later. We're so blessed to have you. We love you so much. Thank you for encouraging us and supporting Catching Up at Memorial Ministries and the believers here, and as well as the missionaries all over the world. And we thank the Lord for you. We are going to go on backstage. We're talking about persecution. We're talking about some of the churches that would accelerate persecution. And we're going to just let Jacob loose on the last part. So if you want to catch that up, it's not going to be on Rumble. I'm sorry, not going to be on YouTube or Facebook. It's going to be on Rumble, Memorial TV, memorialtv.org, RTN, Vimeo, Telegram. So tell your friends about it. We're going to be on backstage dealing with a very heavy subject. Now, before we finish, Jacob, we heard from Congressman Getz, which is we were talking about McCarthy and the ousting of the Speaker of the House, but he made something very interesting. He made a comment regarding the de-dollarization. Right, the dollar is going down. We know the dollar is doomed. He said if we're gonna lose the dollar, this is some of the problems. This is why we need a budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He knows that the writing's on the wall. He did mention BRICS, but as you mentioned, BRICS is not such a threat right now. The whole world is going in that direction. The M1 and M2 charts are showing that, which is the money supply and the speed of money, is showing that we're hitting a level that it's 1870, 1820, 1893, 1921, 1931, which were all recessions and depressions. 2023, we just hit that mark again. It's a 153-year history. 5 instances where the M2 and M1 has declined by at least 2% in year-to-year basis. We just hit it. What's at stake now is the debt clock, the de-dollarization of the dollar, and of course, the implosion of the dollar and the inflation. It's going to cause what many would consider a huge reset on this market. And so we're reaching a mega doom, and not to be hyperbolic, mega doom scenario where the U.S. economy is going to go down very quickly unless, and this is to your point, Jacob, CBDCs come in. Jacob, how off are we from that assessment? It's going down. There's only one thing that's going to rescue it.
Okay, understand the going down. Let me make an analogy. I hope I'm not being too crude. If someone is young, a young guy and healthy, and he has a high sperm count and he loves his wife, he has a natural potency, okay, which lends itself quite naturally to procreation, okay, to having kids. You have a young virile guy who loves his wife and a high sperm count, and he's amorous, and he's going to be naturally prone to having children, okay? But then you get another guy who's over the hill and he's on Viagra. You know what I mean? Well, we can think of the economy of the United States or of Europe, or take your pick. They're not potent. They're on Viagra. The Viagra is quantitative easing. It's inflation. You stimulate the economy artificially with printing of money, by monetizing of debt. A taxation without representation is what it actually comes to, in 2 ways. One, the people are paying higher prices for the same thing. So where's the money going? To the government. And secondly, right, push it when they get a raise, it puts them in a higher tax bracket. So you've got a double taxation without representation. Okay, you've got an artificial method of stimulating the economy. It's not savings, it's not capital investment, it's not increase productivity. It's Viagra. It's quantitative easing. What happens when you run out of Viagra? What happens when you raise interest rates? Obviously, you're going to get those kind of statistics. Yeah, inflation is going to go down, but recession becomes inevitable. The reason recession becomes inevitable is because the economic growth was artificially stimulated. It wasn't real. It wasn't coming from savings-backed capital investment. It wasn't coming from increased productivity. It was coming from quantitative easing. It was coming from inflation. It was coming from government deficit. Now, if you begin to raise interest rates and the inflation rate goes down, and you're going to cause a recession. There's no other possibility. If an old man stops taking Viagra, the sweet bird of youth is flown. There's nothing he's going to do about it. Well, that's what's happened.
Jacob, you had these 5 events that happened when the M1, M2 went down really fast. 5 events, 1893, 1870, 1921, 1931. The last one, 1931, 1933, before this year. What shortly happened after that Great Depression?
What happened was Roosevelt took what would have been over in 3 years and made it last 10 years.
Yeah.
The new year. A depression, something that would have been over within 3 years, took 10 years. And then it ended not by getting out of the depression, but by getting into a war.
That
is the economy. That is what is happening.
And you hit it on the money. Boy, I'm concerned about that. When you see the economy, I mean, what is the next recourse? Well, certain Raytheon and all these other military companies are doing very well, and they want to do it with. They want to do what more. They want to have more backing from the government. So this seems to be that we're heading toward a war that's going to get us out of some depression, but it's not going to come back as the economy that we once knew it. It's going to be a CBDC, a new deal.
Look,
I don't know what
the United States has been on a wartime economy since about 1937. We have not had a real budget. We have not had a real budget
since the
in
90s,
several years.
Since the 90s. This is insane. How can you, Jacob, you likened it onto a cocaine addict going on a cocaine spree, and then eventually the cocaine stops.
That's right.
Or you die.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I don't know what.
Remember what Milton Friedman said. Inflation is like an alcoholic. The perceived short-term benefits come soon. Getting drunk makes you feel better artificially. You can drink your problems away. But then it catches up with you. But then when you quit, you get an alcoholic gets delirium tremens, you get DTs, and the bad effects come first before the good effects. When you're going on a binge, the good effects come before the bad. But then when you try to kick, the bad effects come before the good. Apply it to an economy. Milton Friedman was exactly right.
Yeah. He was a great teacher, and Thomas Sowell learned under him. So that's there's something to say about that. Now, as we finish, Jacob, the last thing we want to talk about, and this is an important one, is of course we're running, toward the end of catching up, is the fact that yes, the economy is going down. There's wars. There's all kinds of problems in society, spiritually, morally. It has been devastated in the Western world because the lack of the gospel preaching, the lack of the gospel faith, and the lack of the real believers being salt and light. And one aspect of society that is very evident is lawlessness. There's so much violence on the street, and this is, again, I'm not being hyperbolic. Please don't confuse me trying to get ratings. A woke CEO was killed. A tech CEO was killed. A journalist, you could say anti-conservative, anti-Christian, was killed from, he was making fun of Christians and conservatives and saying that there was too much violence. Let's talk about the journalist first, Mr. Kruger, and then we'll go to the CEO. Mr. Kruger is a journalist, lived in Philadelphia, mocked Christians and other conservatives, saying that there was a violence in Philadelphia. He just
where you have Paul Krasner, Soros-funded DA, who was pro-crime, letting criminals go. This guy with filthy language, with vulgarity, began denouncing people, conservatives, who were concerned about the crime rate in Philadelphia and what was happening. He actually mocked them and said all is actually well. That was, well, look, I do not agree with his murder.
No, I know.
Celebrate his murder, but neither do I mourn it. He got what he advocated for. He got what he voted for. Where is his arrogant mouth now? I wonder what he thinks now. He is almost certainly in hell when you look at his moral values or lack thereof. He's almost certainly in hell. He'll be in the lake of fire forever if the scripture is to be believed. I wonder what he's saying now. Well, it doesn't matter what he's saying now. His vulgarity and stupidity have followed him. He's reaped what he sowed. He has harvested the fruit of his own arrogant stupidity. As the scripture says, be ye not surprised when sudden destruction comes upon the wicked.
Yeah.
No, I am not happy with what happened to him. I wish it didn't happen. Crime is crime, murder is murder, evil is evil. But don't expect me to mourn the death of somebody who was brought about the political environment where these kind of things happen to begin with. He simply reaped the consequences of his own actions.
He promoted violence. He actually said drug addicts have the right to steal.
That's right. He said drug addicts have the right to steal in order to survive.
Yeah. And they can do whatever they needed to do to survive. They can go, they can steal, they can rob someone. So Kruger basically ran into his own ideologies. A man
correct.
came to his house seven times, shot him. And there are some concerns whether or not this was random. It doesn't seem to be random. He seemed to have some kind of connection with either domestic violence or a drug
Gay
deal.
lover, a homosexual lover.
Yes.
Look,
So
I don't celebrate his murder, but neither do I mourn his death.
yeah. Now in Baltimore, EcoMap Technology CEO Pava Marie Lepere was anti-racist activist, BLM supporter, anti-Christian, championed many policies that led to the serious criminals being released from jail. Then came Jason Billingsley, went into her apartment building. She let him in. He pretended not to have a key. He was sentenced to 30 years for a first-degree sex offender. He was a first-degree sex offender. He was let loose by Mosby because of good credits.
That's another pro-crime prosecutor.
So this man followed her into the building. She let him in. He followed her into the elevator, took her up to the roof, raped her, and killed her. And they were looking already for him because he had already attempted murder on another person 6 days earlier. Jacob, why are these people so pro?
I believe that like that stupid woman in California who was murdered in her shop. I believe like any of them. Like Kruger, or like that chap in New York who was knifed. Ryan
Carson, yeah.
I believe the Lord has given them over to the depravity of their own mind and values. As you say, they're anti-Judeo-Christian.
Yes.
As you say, they are essentially pro-crime in terms of their political expression. They're pro things that the Word of God says are wrong. They've reaped the consequences of their own action. I believe it is I don't think that God did it, but I believe God allowed it to happen in judgment. And I absolutely firmly believe that God has given them over to a depraved mind.
You have this Democratic congressman, Henry Cuellar. Henry Cuellar was carjacked at gunpoint in D.C. It was 3 black males. That's what the police said. His office went, so far to saying, don't say black males, just say 3 males. He voted for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to hold police more accountable and end racial profiling. He was carjacked at gunpoint. His car was taken away. He was almost violently attacked. He still doubles down on the fact that police should stop racial profiling. I mean, it's unbelievable how people will go this far to promote lawlessness, and then when it happens, they don't care.
Okay. I don't believe in racial profiling. I do believe in profiling high crime neighborhoods and cities, irrespective of race. It should not be about race. It should be about high crime areas. Now, the left will interpret it as racist. Wait a minute. When you have stop and frisk, when you have Terry searches and so forth, whose lives are being saved? Primarily the lives of other blacks.
That's right.
Most of the murders in these inner cities are black on black crime. You save the lives of black people and you're being called a racist. It's just like pro-life advocates. 7 out of 10 abortions in most of these places are in and around minority, particularly black communities.
That's
you
right.
save the life of black babies, therefore you're a racist. That is why I believe the left has been given over. They've been given over to a depraved mind. They can't think rationally.
Yeah, a lawless society. You see that in the book of Amos. You see that in other prophets that spoke about the lawlessness, and Habakkuk was talking about that going against the law. Well, here we have it. Now, of all things, the Biden administration finally admits that there's a problem with the rampage of immigration. Now they're willing to build a wall on the southern border as migrant crisis worsens. So you have migrant crisis, the drugs, the violence, and obviously some of these cities have increased. Some of these cities are sanctuary cities. The violence has increased, the crime has increased. So now Mallorca echoes Trump, seemingly. There's an acute, immediate need to construct a physical barrier on the border, waiving 26 laws that were previously there that you couldn't build it because of, endangered species, clean water, indigenous graves, all that stuff. So now that you have a problem, a big problem now in the sanctuary cities and inner cities, now you have to construct the wall. Jacob, I mean, do people see this as hypocrisy? Or are they going to champion Biden as some kind of hero?
Rational people will certainly see it as hypocrisy, but people who vote Democrat are not generally rational. They vote with their emotions. They subscribe to a narrative. Again, they've been given over to believe idiocy. They're people who are stupid by choice. So it doesn't, of course it's hypocrisy. Of course it's visibly hypocrisy, but don't expect people on the left to see it that way. You want to build a wall. Well, when you allow terrorists and narco-terrorists and human traffickers and people smuggling fentanyl to come across the border with impunity, the first thing they should build is not a wall. The first thing they should build is a scaffold with a hangman's noose times 4. One for Garland, one for Harris, one for Mayorkas, and one for Biden. The first thing you need to do to protect the border is not build a wall, but build a scaffold with hangman's nooses to hang 4 traitors. That's the first thing that needs to happen.
Treason. Yeah, treason. Now, Jacob.
The Constitution is clear. The president has to protect the borders. He has not done it. He has favored China, fentanyl trafficking. He's favored cartels. He's favored human traffickers. He's favored everybody but the people he was elected to protect.
Yeah, in states like Arizona, Texas, Florida, all these states that are being overrun, he actually castigates them and says you shouldn't stop them. Just let them in. You shouldn't stop them. Yeah,
of course. And don't send them to cities of refuge like New York. Keep them in Texas and Arizona. Don't send them to the cities of refuge. They don't want them anymore. That is, Eric Adams is another hypocrite.
Yeah, New York. Yeah. Now, Jacob, this is happening while the economy is going down, but seemingly still hanging in there. What's going to happen when you have a major reset and problems in the economy? People are going to go absolutely crazy because it'll be lack of food, lack of resources. If this is happening now, can you imagine? I don't want to imagine.
People are ignoring the signs already. You're getting food deserts in Black communities.
Yeah.
As a direct result of the policies of Black Lives Matter, defund the police, and pro-crime DAs funded by Soros, we are already getting food deserts in Black communities. I just think of a Black grandmother being forced to get on a bus or even 2 buses in a cold city in the winter like Chicago or Detroit and have to travel by bus to go buy groceries in a supermarket because the supermarkets were financially forced to close down where she lives because the police have been defunded, because Black Lives Matter didn't oppose crime. It opposed the people who oppose crime, and because of left-wing politicians, because of pro-crime prosecutors like Kim Fox, I feel sorry for that old black grandmother. I don't feel sorry for the politicians. I don't feel sorry for the people who have caused it. But the signs are already there. Now, if they can't see the signs that are already there, by the time the explosion that you're talking about transpires, and it'll be too late. They're ignoring the warning signs. Yeah. You know, if you're driving on the interstate in America or motorway in England, and you're nearly out of petrol, and your warning light, your fuel gauge warning light begins flashing, you know you better get some petrol. If you ignore that warning light, you're going to run out of petrol in the middle of nowhere on the motorway and have a real problem. You're going to have to get the AA or the RAC or whatever it is. You're going to have a problem. Okay? Well, you're ignoring the sign. Well, that's what they're doing. They're already ignoring the signs. And when you ignore those signs, what's going to happen?
No, you're absolutely right. Go ahead, Jay.
Just wanted to go back to the border real quick. The Democrats are now doing a bait and switch on everyone. You see, they want to put the wall up now because they're going to do it. However, it has evolved beyond that. You have to go to the NGOs, the Catholic charities, the Protestant charities that are paying to ship the migrants from the Darien Gap through Mexico all the way to the border. Unless you take away their money, unless you seize their assets. Now, here's where you should seize assets. You should be seizing assets from these non-governmental organizations that are paying for this migration to the U.S. border. And what is their incentive? Well, their incentive should be obvious. They make money off of this.
Big time. Yeah, Catholic charities, Baptist charity, which really has nothing to do with anything religious. They're just simply using the name and
that is one of the places where Bill O'Reilly was quite naive and at times even stupid. His support of and defense of Catholic charities without looking at what they really engage in.
What they were doing in. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone, for watching Catching Up with Jacob. We have come to the conclusion of Catching Up with Jacob, and we're going to go to the other part of Catching Up with Jacob. It's called Backstage. And we're only going to be on Rumble. We're only going to be on Vimeo and Telegram and Memorial TV, memorialtv.org. Did I miss one? RTN. And so we're not going to be on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're on one of those, switch over to Rumble if you want to ask the questions. We're already taking the questions in. They're coming in right now. And we'll see you guys there in a minute. But if you are still on YouTube and Rumble or Facebook, I should say, you're not going to be able to catch the backstage part of the episode. So jump over to the other ones. We will see you in a few minutes.
Hello, and thank you for watching Memorial TV. There are so many things that are happening at Memorial Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.